Welcome to the AgEmerge podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monty Bottens. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the podcast today. We're excited to welcome Andrew Carroll, founder of EcoThrive Farm Management from Chowchilla, California. He's on a mission to rethink how farming practices work from the ground up. Literally. After stepping away from a music career in Los Angeles, Andrew dove into regenerative farming and discovered the incredible potential of building resilient soil systems. We'll hear how he's cutting input costs, improving yields, and restoring balance on the farm. Whether you're curious about cover cropping, reducing inputs, or just looking for some fresh ideas, this is a great conversation you won't want to miss. So let's jump right in.
Well, welcome everyone to this episode of the AgEmerge podcast. I'm blessed to be joined by a California farmer from the great metropolis of Chowchilla, California, Andrew Carroll. Thanks for being on today, Andrew.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you know what? You've listened to the podcast, so you know what we make people do at the beginning, right? We make you tell us your story, and your story is unique and a little bit different, but there's probably a lot of farmers out there that can identify with your story. But go ahead and share a little bit about yourself and what brings you to this regenerative farming movement.
Yeah. So, in 2012, I moved back to Chowchilla from Los Angeles. I was down there. I was a musician, playing music, playing bands. And, I just kind of finally had enough of the city life, and it wasn't for me. So I moved back to Chowchilla. I met my wife, and in 2013, I started working for her dad out on the farm. That was my first experience in agriculture, other than I did work for a beekeeper from 2003 to 2008. And that's kind of what led me, started me down the path that I'm on right now. He taught me a lot about herbicides, fungicides, insecticides. 2003, 2008, colony collapse was a big deal in bees. Everyone's kind of trying to figure out what the heck is going on here. So fast forward to 2013, and I'm working with my father-in-law, and we're driving around, and, I'm just thinking like, man, there's no other plants out here other than your trees. This is, at the time I'm thinking, wow, it's really clean. You have a clean operation, right? And then I start, as we progress throughout the year, I'm seeing how much we're spending on chemicals. We're spending $750,000, $800,000 a year on chemicals. Meanwhile, our PCA is coming and talking with us, and he's telling us about these safaris in Africa and hunting trips in New Zealand. He owns multiple houses, vacationing all the time. And I'm just sitting here going, man, something doesn't add up. This doesn't make any sense. Why is everybody that we do business with able to do all these things, but we can't? And we're the ones doing the work. This just doesn't make any sense to me. And so, I always ask questions. Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And the answer was kind of always the same, right? In terms of, well, that's the way we've always done it. And, Monty, that's not an answer, right? You got to have substance behind that. I need to know why we're doing the things that we're doing. And then we started working with Silas and California Ag Solutions. And he comes up to us one day and he goes, have you guys ever considered cover cropping? And I said, what the heck is that? So he starts talking to us about it. And I said, man, this is what we need to do. So me and my father-in-law have some conversations, and I got to give him credit. He's a lifelong farmer. And he said, let's try it. Right. And that's very rare, for somebody in his position. So we tried it. And, that first year there was some headaches, as with almonds, we harvest onto the ground, and, that came with a whole set of problems for us. But we could see, even in that first year, we could see these results that were so impressive to us. The amount of life that came back to our farm, even in that first year, it was really amazing. And in that first year as well, since we're not broad spraying herbicide across the whole field, we saw immediate savings on herbicide cost, right? Probably 80%. And as time went on, the next 2 years, 3 years, we're incorporating compost and really trying to dive into these healthy soils practices. By year 3, we were saving about $600 an acre on our farming cost. Meanwhile, our yields were staying, relatively the same. And from that point on, since then, I no longer work for my father-in-law. I started my own business in 2020, EcoThrive Farm Management, and the whole focus is just simply soil health and bringing these systems into balance. And we went from considering ourselves to be almond farmers or pistachio farmers to, we're ecosystem farmers, we're soil farmers. This is what our focus is. And then everything else that we're striving for just kind of falls into place after that. So, I spend my time trying to push the envelope, try to be more progressive with these practices, see what else I can get away with, and just keep trying to learn as much as I can.
The AgEmerge podcast is brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. The ASN team is hands-on, digging in and invested in regenerative agriculture. Along with the proper plant nutrition and biologicals to boost your soil microbiome, we provide the ideas and implementation guidance to support you on your soil health journey. So stop farming the same way and contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm.
So I think it's really interesting, coming from the music business into another art, and that's farming.
Right.
I really think that that helps. It helps you see the interconnectedness, right? You know that all the parts need to play together and to make things work. And I think there's a lot of similarities there. So
Absolutely.
a lot of fun. You getting to work for the father-in-law. That can be a challenge, right? But hey, he's a great guy to work with, and I'm glad he took that step with you. I mean, that really was. Describe what it felt like. I mean, you weren't really. You knew you were spending whatever the 700, 800,000 a year on chemical du jour, but
Right.
it's just something that you did, and you didn't think about it that much. And what were some of those aha moments when you're like, wait a minute, there is a different way to approach things? I mean, what did that feel like?
Well, when I was just on his farm, I felt safe, right? We didn't have an audience. It didn't seem like there was people watching. I was working for him. And so it was just kind of like, I have this safety net. And it didn't seem like.
And the first fields weren't right next to the road either. They were, back off the road a little bit.
Right. Well, I will say, when we started cover cropping, we didn't start with a test plot. Our test plot was the whole 218 acres.
There you go.
And that's another thing I got to give him credit on, because a lot of guys are like, well, I'll try it out on a couple acres. And it's like, dude, no, you got to see this. You got to see this whole system develop. And so I give him a lot of credit for stepping out. Where I really started to meet the challenges when I started my own business. And now I'm farming in different areas. I have different people paying attention to me. I was working pretty much just for investors at the time. And so I had other farmers calling these guys and going, what are you doing? Who do you have farming your ground? What is going on? He's going to lose you all your money. You guys need to stop doing this now. And, this is where I got to give credit to the guys that I went to work for, right? Is that they let me do these things. I sold them on these practices and these principles. And, we had ups and downs for sure, a lot of hard times, but they stuck with me and they let me continue on with these practices, even through these hard times. And, in the almond industry, the last 5 years have been very economically difficult. It seems like in the last 5 years, it's not been, who's making the most money, but who's losing the least, right? Like that's kind of the position that we've been in. And so my whole goal was, how cheap can we farm this product and still get a good product? And I don't believe that there's anything more efficient than the ground that you've already paid for, and utilizing that, right? And getting that to a point of functionality where it's cycling nutrients and, mining nutrients, right, that are already there. You've already bought them. We don't have to go out and buy all of this stuff. It's already here and it's inflation proof, and so that's one of the things that I really realized over the last 5 years. In 2021, we saw an increase of 30% roughly in production cost. Well, it didn't hit us that hard, because we're putting the focus on the soil. And so now things have kind of simmered, and we don't have nearly as much stress. We're coming off of a really good year. Our fifth leaf trees that we planted in 2019 with the first investor, we had pretty decent yields. We had, in beginning of July, we had a lot of heat stress, right? High triple digits, 112, 114 degrees. A lot of guys saw nut shrinkage during that time. And for us, we didn't see any of that. We were still getting new growth on our trees because our soil was still cycling nutrients. We were able to reduce our water inputs, which is massive in Madera County. We have big water issues, and we have big water infiltration issues. I'm even convinced that might be it is one of our biggest problems, if not the biggest problem, is how we're using our water. So this last year, we got good yields. We're going to be profitable, which I talk to a lot of my conventional friends now, and they're still hoping to just break even with these increase in prices on the commodity. So, all the data that we're looking at now is saying, hey, we need to keep moving in this direction and keep pushing, and seeing what else that we can accomplish.
Yeah. So when you started your management business, Andrew, most of those trees then were new plantings, or were you coming into existing orchards?
So the first development, or the first property that I worked on when I started my business, was a new development. And that was great because I got to start it out going down this path, right? And that was great. And then we also, that same year, we took over a 20-acre block of pistachios. And that was an interesting thing because where these pistachios are at, we're very restricted on water. There's no private wells. Everything is funneled through the water district. And we started out in drought years. And so out in that area, we should be getting 4 irrigation days a week. When I started out there, we were getting 1. And we have to split that between 2 sets, right? So it's only a 12-hour set on each field, And so my first thing was, when I got on there, I just let everything grow. All the native species, I just let it all take off. And I had weeds that were up to here, right? And my neighbor, real nice guy, we get along great. He's calling me, he's going, Andrew, when are you going to cut this stuff down? You got weeds out here taller than you. And I said, just watch. I'm doing this for a reason. Water is our biggest issue out here. We need to be efficient with it. And, that's when I get all the guys going, well, you're going to have competition for water. All these other plants are going to take the water away from your trees, you've heard the same things over and over, right? It's kind of these old wives' tales. So what I did is I just spent that whole year just monitoring my fields compared to my neighbor's fields. What's going on here, right? So even with just that 12 hours of water a week, and mind you, we get all the same water. All of us are limited to 120 gallons per minute. So it's not like I can jump that up and, I can produce more water on my field than everybody else. And so that's what's really cool about this control, is that we're all getting the same amount of water. So it really just comes down to the practice. And what I was noticing is day 2, day 3, after shutting off water, my neighbors are dry, and so now they're going to go 4, 5, 6 days before their next irrigation, right? In these hot temperatures. And I was noticing that the moisture in my field would last an extra 2, 3 days, and maybe 4 days. And so it's like, I'm closing that window of stress. And as time went on, what I noticed after talking to my neighbor farms there's 3,000 acres total of pistachios out in that area. He farms about 1,500 of it. Okay. So he's neighbors with everybody. He talks to everybody. He's in the know of what's going on. He's been out there for a lot of years. And so he called me up and he goes, what's your grade sheets like? Are you getting 40, 50% split shell counts? And I said, no. I said, I'm getting like 75, 80% split shell counts. Not to mention my kernel size was significantly bigger. And, you know, and from the very beginning, I'm not spraying fungicides, I'm not spraying insecticides. I'm just kind of letting the system develop, right, and get into balance. And that first year, we even had fungus, and my PCA is going, man, we got to spray this stuff. And I said, no. I said, I'm not going to do that this year. And when we went into year two, there was a little bit of fungus that came back, and I said, no, I'm not going to spray it this year. By year three, it was completely gone. It was no longer an issue. And so you can see this system developing, and I know from talking to my neighbors that the production that we're getting is better than what everybody else is getting around me. I'm not having the same kinds of problems. I'm not having issues come harvest time getting the nuts off the tree. I'm not having issues with the split shell counts. I'm not having issues filling that nut. It's uh, all those problems. It wasn't that we weren't getting enough water. It's that we weren't using it correctly.
Yeah. So now, did you continue on with the natural cover crop a second year?
So for the next 2 years, I went in and I planted cover crops. I bought cover crop through CAS green cover,
Yeah.
and we tried going that route, but there was so much native that had already taken over, and I just didn't want to work the ground. I wanted to let that soil function, and plus the other aspect is that property is pretty out of the way, and our water cost is so high that and our production is very limited because they're old variety pistachio trees. And so for me, the name of the game out there is just reducing cost.
Mhm.
And so for me, this was one of those scenarios where we're going, hey, you know, the cover crop that we tried to target and plant it didn't really come up. It was kind of hit or miss. It's out there. It's still out there. I still see the mustard. I still see the radish. I'll still see, voluntary crimson clover come up from time to time. And so it's still out there, but we've just kind of developed a process out there of, less is more. We need to make less passes with equipment through here, and just let it do its thing, right?
So the reason I was asking that, Andrew, is I was wondering how the natives changed in kind of type and mix over time. Because typically you'll see a succession of plants. So you'll get more deep taprooted type broadleaves at the beginning, and then it'll kind of slowly transition to biennials and maybe perennials and
Right.
over time. I was just wondering if you'd seen any of that in that situation.
When I started out there, lots of malva, lots of broadleaf, um, lots of really big, stocky weeds, right? Now I see lots of grasses. And what's beautiful about that is I'm not getting these crazy heights anymore on the growth.
Right.
It's pretty much like knee level,
You're getting
very manageable.
the Spanish grasses in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I've definitely seen a change, and I like that coverage. It just seems to, it just gives it this nice coating across, and it just really holds in that moisture. So pretty much all we do is mow once, maybe twice a year. And that's pretty much it. We This year I'm going to move away from herbicides completely. I was using herbicide spot spraying around my emitters, but my plan is this year, bring those emitters up into the trees. I'm going to move all my water lines up and utilize my berm mower, and we'll just be mowing out there, and ground disturbance is going to be pretty much zero.
Right. And then, all you're looking at then is conventional fertility or not, and to get you to organic, maybe a value add or regenerative
Right.
certification that you can get more value out of your crop.
Right. Absolutely.
I think it's interesting. You know what I'd love to see is I would love to see the native Californian grasses be competitive with the Spanish grasses. I would love to see that. It's too bad that those got introduced, and um, they're so hard to overcome the
Right.
Spanish annuals. But anyway, give it time. That's what developed there over a long period of time, correct? So
Right.
given a long enough period of time, that's probably better adapted than some of those colonial grasses. So that's pretty cool. One thing I think it's important, and I'm sure you've gotten some pushback on this too. Pistachios for sure have an alternate bearing cycle.
Right.
Almonds can have an alternate bearing cycle because you do one thing this year and you might get a great result, but oh, did you mess up your set for the following year or your bloom for the following year? Talk a little bit about those fears when you were entering into this, and then there that fear is there, I'm sure, but then 2 years later, 3 years later, you can look back and look a whole lot smarter. Talk about the what you've observed in the alternate bearing side of things.
So with the pistachios, we farm it's Kerman variety, and they definitely have a big swing. You're on year out in our area, you're looking at 2,600 pounds an acre. On your off year, you're looking at 400 or 500 pounds an acre. So everything is combined into 2 years, right? And that's what we base it all off of. And so what it is just the way that I do things is I don't do programs. I don't like that word because there's so many variables, there's so many things changing all the time. And so we monitor, right? We soil samples, tissue samples, sap samples, and we just kind of gauge. We look at the price. Where's our tree at? Where's our soil at? Is this something that we have to do? And a lot of it even comes down to taking risks and taking chances, right? In the first couple of years there with pistachios, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I still really don't. But we took chances, and the biggest thing is just being active in your field. Is walking your fields, jump on the quad and run. Make sure you're getting through your fields weekly. I try to hit each of my fields every 3 days. Just so that I can monitor activity and see what's going on. And, the first year, my PCA calls me and he goes, "Hey, we got navel orange worm. We need to do something about this." I said, "Okay, take a picture, send me a pin drop. I'll come take a look." "Oh, well, I'm not seeing a whole bunch." I'm like, "Okay, so is it a problem or is it not a problem in your eyes?" Right.
It was the calendar said it was there. So
Right. And so I go out there and I'm driving around and I go, "Man, I just don't really see anything." And so, we didn't treat, we didn't do anything. And now it's been 5 years. We haven't treated for navel orange worm even one time, and we're consistently getting reject numbers of maybe 2%, right? Which guys in my area are having a hard time getting that with sprays.
right, this year was terrible for it with multiple sprays.
Right. Last year was insane, man. I was hearing numbers as high as 30-40%. And these are guys who spray 3 or 4 times, right? So last year I didn't spray at all. I ended up with a 12%, which I wasn't real psyched about. But hey, when I'm looking around at my neighbors, that wasn't so bad. I saved the money and didn't get as much damage, and so it's really interesting.
You missed out on the safari trip, though.
I did.
Dang it.
And I may never get that, right? But I have my fields to go into. There's plenty of nature happening there. I'm very happy there. So
Creating your own safari. There you go.
That's right.
All right. So we got some myths to debunk. This is going to be the new episode of Mythbusters here.
Okay.
Frost. Oh, I'm afraid to plant cover crops because frost will affect my bloom. What's your experience been with that? I know what mine's been, but what's your experience been with that?
Well, I'm no scientist. I didn't go to college. I only know what I've experienced and what I've seen. But what I will say is, 2 years we had pretty massive frost event, and or 2 years ago, I'm sorry, and it was pretty devastating, right? And everyone's telling me, "Oh, this is why we got to keep the ground bare because we need it to heat up and push that heat up." Well, then it comes to find out, well, that's only going to change 1 to 2 degrees, about 3 feet high, right? Our whole crop is above 3 feet.
Above your head, typically.
Yeah, every single nut is above 3 feet. And so for me, I'm sitting here going, well, that's not going to do us any good, right? That doesn't make any sense.
And it cools down more at night.
Right. Right. So here's what I was noticing is I would go out there and I have pictures and videos in my phone somewhere. But I would, we had 4 days of frost. This was, more than 6 hours below 28 degrees, which for our area is pretty uncommon. And I'm going out there and I just see nothing but ice across the top of my cover crop. And I'm sitting here going, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Well, I start pulling grass back, and what I'm seeing is that the ice is melting and it's dripping down. And then the more that you get down, oh, it's getting warmer. It's warmer. Oh, this ground is actually pretty decently warm. Right. And so I don't know that it has had any type of a negative impact when it comes to frost. Um, the only negatives that I can see is that I'm in an industry that is focused on bare ground and I don't have bare ground. That's the hardest part is all of our equipment is built for bare ground. And so we've had to make modifications. We've had to try very unconventional methods, bringing in equipment that maybe wasn't meant for this, but we're going to go ahead and give it a try anyway. But when it comes to frost, I can't see that it's had any type of a negative impact on these operations at all.
Yeah, I think the frost fear is greater with those that aren't doing cover crops than after they do cover crops. I mean, it's really kind of a uh, lack of a better word, an excuse to not do it, right?
I hear lots of those.
And
And the fear,
why not to?
right? And I'm glad you touched in on the fear because that is really, it seems like what's kind of got a grip on this industry as a whole. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. And that's what I hear all the time. And I just haven't seen any of it. Well, if you don't spray this, your whole crop's going to get wiped out. I haven't seen that, you know. In fact, I'll tell you something just so it's not all good things. This year, I went ahead on my fifth leaf almond trees that were developed in 2019. I went ahead and I applied a fungicide this year for the first time out of fear. Okay. I was sitting here going, last year was so terrible. The crop was bad all the way around, industry wide. We had crazy weather events during pollination.
And for everyone listening, the fifth year, this is like the first year where we're going to have a good harvestable crop, right? To get some cash in the bank to pay off
Right.
establishment crops because year three is just annoying. You got to spend
Right.
money to knock them off and don't make a thing. Year four is you might pay for the harvesting, right? And
Right.
year five, this is finally we got some money coming in. Okay, just to set the stage.
Yeah.
Keep going,
You're absolutely
keep
right,
going, Andrew.
Monty. And so I'm coming in off of, crop year 23 going, man, I just need to protect myself. I need to show these guys that I'm working for, that I'm not just being negligent, which I never have been, right? But people can get those ideas. And so it's like, I just need to do what everybody else is doing this time around. So I went ahead and I sprayed a fungicide. And that was my biggest regret this year. This was the first time I actually got fungus. This is the first time, and it's because I brought down, this system that had been building up and developing over time. I lost my natural protection by spraying that fungicide.
So we got to back up the truck a little bit, and I'll share some of this, and you jump in, as appropriate. But the leaf surface is there's a microbial community that exists on the surface of leaves, stems, and trunks in this case. And that whole microbial community is called the phyllosphere. We've probably heard of the rhizosphere, which is the microbial community immediately adjacent to the roots. The ones that are immediately adjacent to the tissues of a plant above ground is called the phyllosphere. And just like in nature, there's good bugs and bad bugs, pretty much everywhere, right? And the reason that we're alive and and exist is there's more good bugs than bad bugs. So they've kept us alive, and both the plants and the food that we eat and ourselves. I mean, ourselves and a lot of organisms out there are 10 times more microbe than their human DNA or almond DNA. So then when we come in there and we uh, hit the button, right? It's not the easy button, but in this case, it's the doomsday button, and we nuke it with fungicides. all of those good fungal species that we had that were keeping the bad fungal species in check or within reason to not let them explode, we just hit the button and we wiped everything out. And then what happens is the pests that we're dealing with, those type of fungal species tend to repopulate first. And they repopulate at such a rate that the good guys that were keeping them in check before can't keep up with them. So, uh, I is that a good description of what you think happened there in that case?
That's a great description of what happened. That was the first time that I sprayed it, and that's the first time that I had problems.
Yeah.
And so now I'm spending now I'm going back to the hands-off approach. Let the system get back in balance, and it's probably going to take some time. I've been kicking myself all year for it because I have to go over there and look at this shot hole, and and it's just a constant reminder of that mistake that was made, right? But I also believe that we learn the most in our failures. So I've come to appreciate those failures because they teach me a lot, and those are lessons that will stick with me for the rest of my life.
And for you or any other farmer out there listening, and realize fungicides a lot of times are put on with airplanes, and getting an airplane to leave a portion off is tough. But if it's put on with ground rigs, leave a check area, not just a few, to where you can actually see, did it progress more, because the border areas are going to have a problem. The
Right.
border areas are going to have had a biology change, but without effective control, because there's information sharing between rows. So, yeah, I if you decide to poke that button again, Andrew, which I'm guessing you probably won't, but if you're pressured into doing that, leave a check, and no, I think that's the way to do it. And then when the pilot gripes at you, I have a favorite saying I like to tell contractors, that I righty the checky. When they bitch about something, just be like, "That's fine. I righty the checky."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh well, yeah, I guess so." So
I'll remember that one.
it always they appreciate that in the heat of the moment.
Right.
Not. So, but yeah, that's interesting, that observation. So I think what's most important is what we see with our senses, or observe with all of our senses, not necessarily what we hear someone else talk about, a fear. And a lot of crop protection, a lot of plant nutrition, a lot of tillage is sold on fear, right?
Right.
I mean, that's ultimately how it is. Now, there isn't somebody sitting there at the Big Ken company, with the annual sales training and saying, okay, new PCAs, today we're going to teach you the element of fear and how to spell on fear. So they're not that nefariously evil, okay?
No,
But
no.
but honestly, that's why we're doing these things. I mean, that's what else can motivate somebody to spend $750,000, right?
Right.
Something has to. Okay, back up the truck a little bit. You talked about some specialized equipment you've had to do, to develop and use, and you mentioned about putting a drip lines up in the trees. Walk us through some of the wild inventions that you can. Well, unless there's patent pending, of course.
No, no, no. No. So, every single year has been a trial, right? It's you
When you're done trialing,
when I'm dead.
so you're going to be trialing all the time.
Right, right. Yeah, we're definitely still developing, and we're still making improvements. And one thing that we did, my father-in-law, when working with him on his operation, we started utilizing our stick jack more. He had all older orchards, so the stick jack was definitely more of a necessity. But we kept having these problems because this grass is coming up and it's running up this belt, but all these nuts are piled up in there too, right? And so we're losing. I couldn't even tell you how many pounds per acre, but it was a significant amount to where we're going, hey, we have to figure out a way around this. We're not going to stop cover cropping. That's not going to happen. So we have to figure out, how do we get to where we want to be, um, with this system that we're developing, with where the industry is at also. So what we did is we took our stick jack over to Jackrabbit, and they modified it, and they cut a hole in the middle of it, and they put a fan in. And so what happens now is we've got this stick jack where all this grass comes up and this fan is blowing off of the hydraulics. Okay. And all it's doing is basically like tumbling this grass. And all these nuts are breaking free and they're falling back down into the windrow. And that grass just kind of sits there and tumbles. Some of it shoots back out. It looks like a mess, right? But it does the job. And it gets it to a good enough to a point where when they come in to do pickup, they can easily go in there and pick it up, even with, that leftover organic matter and stuff like that. It just kind of breaks it up. And so we utilize mowing with our flail mowers to chop up that grass a little bit smaller, utilize that stick jack to tumble that grass, break all the nuts free. And so that was the first thing that we did.
Can I backfill a little bit for, the corn farmer that's jealous that he doesn't?
Sorry. Yes.
And he really wants to have a stick jack now because they sound cool. So anyway, when almonds are harvested, they shake them, and the typical management has been we shake the tree, nuts fall on the floor to dry. And when we have a cover crop there and residues of the cover crop, there's some challenges in getting the nuts separated from the cover crop residues. That's why there's been this bare floor mentality.
Right.
So then once the nuts have dried enough, we come through with a sweeper, and much like a hay, like a bar rake for hay, and we sweep them into a windrow in the middle. And then, but in the process of sweeping them into that windrow, you're sweeping in, like you said, the sticks from these older trees that were over north of 25 years old.
Oh yeah.
And probably 30, so they're at the end of their life cycle. And then you also sweeping all this cover crop residue through. So what you're saying is normally we're going through with this, it's basically a conveyor with these fingers on it, probably 10 inches, 12 inches long. And
Right.
it lifts it just basically goes through that row like a conditioner and lifts the sticks out of there. But like you're saying, you're lifting out all the ropey grass. So like if you had sun hemp or mustards and all these kind of viney broadleaves in your cover crop mix, they're kind of like sticks in there. So
Right.
use that and the fan to clean that row so that then when you picked it up with your harvester, you would have less load on that harvester and to get it going. But then over time, I think you've kind of learned to, and we've learned together, right, to manage that cover crop to not let it get so rank and
Right.
manage that residue to put it toward the berms where it gets watered through the season and has microbial activity to, decompose it and release the nutrients back to the tree.
Right.
Those are some things, but maybe I stole your thunder on the equipment development there. But
No, not at all.
just to kind of
Actually,
backfill a little bit that of the harvesting process is that, you can say, okay, yep, clean floor. That's the way we've always done it. It's easy, and I can't manage against a clean floor. It's like, no, I know it's a higher priority to have a healthy soil. I'm going to figure out the equipment to make a healthy soil possible.
right. Absolutely. And so now I'm thank you for
Sorry to
filling in all that.
do all
No,
that, but
no.
I'm just trying, you and I get that, but if we
You're
want to talk
100%
rotary
right.
combines with you sometime, you'll know the feeling. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. So now we've developed it. So at that time, we were still spraying our berms, with my father-in-law. And now I've gotten to a point where I utilize my berm mower. So going to hanging up water lines. I hung up water lines in the tree. I put vine clips on because it's a drip. So, water's wanting to move down to the lowest point, right? And so in order to keep that pattern consistent across the whole field, we put vine clips on and keeps that water pattern right in the same spot.
I haven't seen those before. It's just like a little wire that goes around the hose to where in the
It's just
water
a little
runs to
plastic
it,
clip.
then
Yeah.
it congregates there and falls there instead of going 10 feet away.
Right. Right. So we utilized that. We did that last year. So this year was my first year on the almonds to not utilize any herbicides at all. What I did is I let all the winter grasses and everything grow up on the berms. And what was beautiful was those all died off when the heat came. And it just left this matting across the berms where nothing came up.
So it just looked like the coastal hills underneath your trees.
Right.
It's
Right.
dead. It's not taking any water,
Nope.
and yet it's providing a mulch there
But
for
it's saving me water. I
for
was
water.
able to I was able to reduce my water inputs. I've seen numbers anywhere from 18 to 25%, below ET. So meanwhile, a lot of my conventional counterparts are irrigating 5 to 20% above ET, and we're irrigating
Hold on. think about that. It just hit me. I'm sorry to interrupt. You reduced to 18 to 25% below ET.
Right.
Technically, that means the ET figures are wrong.
Well, I think that they're based on
Figures are based on bare ground coefficient,
right,
right?
right. So
So
this is what I tell
that needs to
people.
be rewritten, and that's another topic next. But yeah, I
So
think
that's what I tell people is we can really do something about the E and ET,
yeah,
right? It's we're losing our biggest competitor is not other plants. Our biggest competitor is the sun. That's what's taking the most moisture from us. And then we can jump into, the topics of soil temperature and what that does, right? I've heard figures of once your soil hits 100 degrees, you lose 85% of plant available moisture. To me, that's insane. In our area, in the dead of summer, by 10 a.m., I see soil temperatures of 130, 140 degrees. By 2 o'clock, you're creeping up on 150 degrees. Okay, so as a person, if you're standing out in 112 or 114 degree weather and your feet are buried in 150 degrees, how are you going to feel? It's not going to feel very good. You're probably not going to have a lot of energy to do the things that you need to do to thrive. And so this is the amazing thing that we saw this year. Our soil temperatures, even in the dead of summer, we never got above 95 degrees. And so we're able to cut back on our water usage and our trees are still thriving. I can send you pictures and videos where in July, when almond trees are typically shutting down because guys are going into a deficit prepping for harvest, my trees are still shooting out new growth because they're cycling nutrients and
and
they're
would you
happy.
notice a difference in the mite load?
None. None.
So what I'm getting at is because you have a leaf that's still healthy and active, it's less interesting to mite.
Right. And that was, when I was with my father-in-law in year one, that was one of the first things that we noticed. We used to, during harvest time, we used to have to spray for mites 3 or 4 times, in a conventional system. That was one of the first things to go out the window is, well, oh, we don't have to spray for mites. We're not seeing mites anywhere. What's going on? And this went on, for 9 years after we started those practices, we sprayed for mite one time in 9 years. And it used to be 3 or 4 times a season, so when you're talking about sustainability, we're not just talking about, environmental sustainability. We're talking about economic sustainability.
Yeah, they
We're
do go hand in hand.
absolutely 100%.
Oh,
So
and then the other thing I remember, just because you brought it up at that field day we hosted there at your father-in-law's, is that block we were standing in at that time was the older block and, needed the D-sticker and those kind of things. Um, that was on the chopping block
yes,
being pushed out. And then
yes,
the other thing you guys noticed, and you've probably noticed this maybe in other orchards since, is that lower limb dieback typically happens at the bottom of the tree and works its way up, and it's associated with high humidity and bread molds. So you got to have the pathogen, the bread mold, which is everywhere on planet Earth, and then you have humidity that drives in that canopy from, and then also high nitrogen content. So
right,
your carbon to nitrogen ratio in the plant will drive lower limb dieback. But, well, officially, we don't know what happens. It's kind of genetic. We're not sure. So
right.
that's what the experts say. So, but you turned back the clock, and several other farmers have turned back the clock just by lowering nitrogen application, cover crops, right? And being more judicious on the water. And that orchard, you guys decided to.
We kept it
And how many years did it continue to go?
until they sold it this year.
Unreal. That was like 7 or 8 years, right? Beyond.
So,
That's like
oh,
a 40-year
absolutely.
old orchard, and it was still producing.
And I'll tell you something about that orchard too, Monty. Last year, well, as we talked about, almond yields were just down industry wide, right? And so that field was actually farmed by a friend of ours last year. And I was amazed at how little water he put on. I mean, it went beyond what I'm comfortable with. And those trees still looked amazing. They were thriving, dark green color, nice leaf size. The yields were still low like everybody else's, but the tree looked healthy. And there was zero inputs. There was no fertilizers, no fungicides, no insecticides, nothing. And those trees were just thriving. It was is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. Don't pay any attention to the facts, right?
Right. But
Okay.
to me, this is great news.
Yeah.
There's a protective layer there that um, we can make mistakes and bounce back a lot easier. We can make mistakes and we have a little bit of a buffer there. Where in that conventional setting, you don't have those buffers. You mess up, you miss that irrigation, you cut back too much, you're going to be in trouble. But in these systems, I'm just finding out the trees are much more resilient, to everything from disease to pest to drought, any type of weather extremes, right? And it's just been absolutely incredible to watch this.
So now you've all heard the saying, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting, right? And if you are farming east of the 100th meridian, it don't make a whole lot of sense. But when you're out west, well, back east, they're fighting when they drink the whiskey. That's just how that works. But out west, that has a big meaning. And California, in particular, has been affected greatly recently by the surface water reduction because water is being diverted for environmental purposes to save supposedly endangered species and salinity management in the delta and those kind of things. Groundwater pumping has been severely restricted because of recharge rates. So we've kind of hit everything's hit water at once. So the last thing in the world that a new farmer that's considering cover crops wants to do is waste money on cover crops. And you talked about that earlier in the episode here about your neighbors thinking you're crazy letting the weeds go. Um,
But you should see that
your
area now.
observations, I know, but what are some of your observations on the infiltration rate of when we do get a rain? There are some rains that you get in California now, depending on where you are from Sacramento to Bakersfield, it'll go from 15 inches to 6 inches, kind of in
Right.
that stretch of land. And you're in about the 12
10,
inch
10 to
zone.
12 would be like the annual
Right.
average, right?
But it always comes when you not growing the plant. I mean, that's the secret to the
Right.
Mediterranean climate. It rains when we're not growing. So a lot of water runs off in the winter.
You know what? So
Well,
that.
on other people.
Right. Well, and this was one of the first things that we noticed as well on my father-in-law's place. I'll just kind of touch back on that. So we had a holding pond there next to his house. And I don't know figures of, it was pretty good size. It was really big. Every year that we got rain, that thing would fill up. In fact, there was one year where we even had the levee break. It got so full, and we had to make these repairs on it.
And that's just from water tail off of the field. So the rainfall from
Right.
the field goes from the top end of the field to the lower end, and then the lower end drains into this large holding pond.
And Monty, this was happening in years where we were not getting that typical average, right? It might be 6 or 8 inches. And excuse me. And what we noticed when we started cover cropping, we're not getting any water in that pond. There was no water.
Well, it's the cover crops are wasting it.
Right, sure. But
Yeah,
you know
right?
what?
Is that what
That's
happened? It's all getting wasted growing those cover crops.
that's what people will say. But then when springtime rolls around and the trees are waking up and everybody starts turning their pumps on, we're not turning our pumps on. We still got moisture there. And this is the case even now, right? Is this last year, guys are firing up their pumps in April, where I'm starting. I can go back on my Phytech information, my data. I didn't fire up my pumps until mid to late May, and so I'm getting a buffer of, probably 3 to 6 weeks anywhere on there with these guys. And so the holding capacity.
And how many tons of biomass have you grown in the meantime?
Right.
So
Right.
you've grown probably a ton of dry matter biomass on dry
Yeah.
matter basis, and you've stored more water in the soil at the same time.
Right. Yeah. It's just we don't experience runoff anymore. It doesn't matter. Even on a year like 2 years ago where we had 20 inches plus of rain, we had no runoff. We had no flooding issues. I can drive down my street that my field is on, and you can see my neighbors where there's these massive puddles, all these things, which we know this is going to be breeding grounds for disease, right? This is going to be a huge problem. This is going to cost you more money. And with us, we just don't have those issues.
Not a problem for the guy that wants to go on the safari, though.
Right.
Great.
But I'm not that guy.
Oh.
And
So how do you explain this to the bureaucrats that have the potential to legislate stupidity in the cover crops, because the method that we have for managing water now in California is not the meters like
No,
everyone else in the rest of the world is. It's let's use some high tech company that probably the bureaucrats are invested in and getting kickbacks
sure.
from to meditate to measure the greenness of the field, right? And
Right.
we're getting constant feedback that it's off 6 to 10 inches
Right.
when we're using cover crops because
Right.
it overestimates the cover crop. How do we stop this madness?
Well, the problem that we have is, they're making policies and asking questions later, right? They're pushing this legislation down the pike, and there's so many unknowns for them, right? They're going, well, we haven't seen this in our.
Are we pulling a Pelosi thing? Well, we just got to sign the bill to see what's in there. I mean, she is from California. Is that
That's the California
create
way.
the regulations to see what's in there?
Right. That's the California way. And, the unfortunate part is the Sigma regulations, they're going to have significant negative impacts on the valley. You know, um, that's what the valley does here. We're in agriculture. We grow stuff, and so it's very interesting. We had a meeting with DWR a couple of weeks ago up at Burroughs Farm, and it seemed to be very eye-opening for them. I had a guy from the East Stanislaus Water Coalition, and he's going, hey, we have 100,000 acres in our GSA. 20,000 of those acres have to come out of production in the next 10 years. And I said, why? That doesn't make any sense to me. And he goes, we got to cut water by 20%. I said, hold on, let me tell you about something, right? Let me show you the numbers. We can reduce this water usage without having to take out a single acre out of production. Okay. What we need to do is we need to be smart about educating farmers, building that trust, and incentivizing them in ways that are sustainable. I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here because I have used grant money, through healthy soils programs, things like that. But it's not a sustainable way of doing things because it's a burden on the taxpayer at the end of the day, right? We're $36 trillion in debt. That's just going to continue to go up. At some point, we have to pump the brakes and go, hey, what can actually work? Maybe, let's strip the property tax for these farmers who are doing the right practices, maybe payroll taxes, things like this, right? Things that can really help them out. That's not going to be a burden on the taxpayer. And so we are getting these opportunities now to come in and have these discussions with people who might actually be able to influence these policies. But we still have very much a long road ahead of us, but the thing is we can still show farmers now you can stay in business. You can reduce your input costs, you can reduce your water usage, and you can still make a beautiful crop that is going to pay you. So the opportunities are opening up. It's been a slow roll.
Have you participated with the Thousand Farms Initiative or with Audubon or any other people that would do observations of the ecosystem improvement that you're seeing that can quantify insect change or bird change or the auxiliary things that you're seeing?
Yeah, so my father-in-law's property was a part of that Thousand Farm Initiative with Dr. Jonathan Lundgren. So they did a 3-year study or so on that place. And 2 months ago, I started working with the wonderful Burroughs family up at Burroughs Family Farms, and I know that they were a part of that as well. And there's things that we see there, as far as insects. The main thing, up at Burroughs is the bird population. That's the thing that really strikes me is their bird population is just unbelievable. I don't see birds typically on farms anymore, you know, but up there, they know. It's like these birds know that this is a place to be. And so we've seen nature come back to the farm in so many aspects. They're not all great. There are hardships when it comes to that: squirrels, gophers, voles, things like that you have to kind of get creative in how you deal with them, especially if you're in organic setting, right? So there are challenges there, but there are definitely not enough challenges to send us in the opposite direction.
Right. And I think the key is everything's a food source for something else.
Absolutely.
Well, as you gain in that the vertebrate population because you have the cover crops to feed them and you've created a habitat for them. We need to find their predator, right? Whether it's
Right.
reptiles or birds or whatever. Um,
And
or
and
the good old fashioned, put the gun. Those are the best videos at the farm show, by the way. You can just
yeah.
the gopher getter. Go onto YouTube, the gopher getter, and check it out because you just blow up those trenches. But
Yeah, but what
anyway,
we've seen is we've seen a return of the red-tailed hawk.
yeah,
We've seen a return of owls. Like there's these species that, as a kid growing up in this area, I did see a lot of these things, and then slowly over time they've just kind of become less and less. But now we're seeing these returns. On my pistachio property, I have a tree. It's a beautiful tree, but there's a nest for a red-tailed hawk in there. And it's been there for 4 years. So every harvest, I tape it off. You guys do not shake this one. This one is doing a specific job. And so it's just what we started doing is just kind of tailoring our operations to what nature is doing and what nature is showing us. And we've just developed this mindset of working with nature instead of against it. And in a conventional setting, you just kill everything. And for me, I'm not going to dive too much into this because I know that this is not what it's about. But as a Christian who believes in creation and that all of this is created divinely with intellect and purpose, we need to figure out how to work with that instead of working against that. And so that's been my whole drive is obviously these things are here for a reason. And the exciting thing for us is we get to figure out why. That's the fun part is we get to unlock all of these things that have, in the past maybe were mysteries or kind of unknowns. And we go, oh, this is why this is here. And to me, that's very exciting stuff. And it makes farming very fun. Even in the hard times where maybe money is in short supply, at least you can sit here and go, man, I love being out here. This is incredible, right? Because when the money dries up, at least you have that love for it and you still have that joy of, man, I can't believe I get to do this.
very good. Well said. And I think we're not trying to intentionally, kill everything. That isn't our thing. But I think we have to get a mindset shift to where we're considering how do we prosper life.
Right.
Then once we're looking at how we prosper life and how we let uh, living systems, soil systems, and the soil plant interaction prosper. And yes, we're going to have to help it along, a little bit here and there. Maybe some different equipment or different approaches to nutrition or different approaches to IPM, and help it along because let's say an orchard, an almond orchard is not a forest. Okay. There's one species out there. It's not thousands of species yet. So there's still going to have to be some help, and we're extracting nutrients from there. You know, we're doing some things that are out of the natural context, but we certainly can get a lot closer to God's design than just whack-a-mole farming, as Dwayne
Right.
kill everything as it pops up. But um, I really I think it's great becoming from outside of farming. It gives you a different perspective on things and the creativity from the music background, and then just being willing to get out there, get it in the field. That commitment to be in every field twice a week, that's a big deal because then you can see what's changing over time and see these relationships. I think we've gotten so busy as farmers, we sit behind desks too much and don't get in the field and notice things.
Right. I agree.
I congratulate you on all that you're doing and how you're not afraid to try things to make them better.
Oh, I appreciate that, Monty. It's been a pretty amazing journey. I think the important thing is surrounding yourself with people who have like-minded goals, who understand the same types of things, right? Building up a team. And that's what's kind of developed over the last few years is, now I have a PCA who is not fighting me on everything, is going, well, why do you do this? And is trying to gain understanding, and trying to work with me within those systems, right? And so it takes time to get to that position, right, where you have this team of, I've got my agronomists, I've got my PCAs, even the workers that I have working with me, getting everybody on the same page of why we're doing the things that we're doing, because it benefits the farmer, it benefits the family, it benefits the worker, it benefits the community. as a whole, right? I mean, the more that we do these things, the more it's going to benefit everybody. I even think about the consumer. They may only get one of my almonds in their bag, but you know what? It's going to be a nutrient dense, clean almond.
That's the next step. Selling your almonds direct to those consumers.
Right.
Well, anything else we should have discussed with our time here today, Andrew? I mean, we covered a lot of ground.
We did. No, for me, I just, for other farmers out there who are considering going down this, I want to encourage you, to keep pushing forward. You're not alone. A lot of times we can feel like we're alone because, we're surrounded by conventional farms, right? But I get into these meetings with other regen growers or organic growers, and I realize we're not alone. We're out there. We're all out there, and we're all going through the same things. And so don't feel like you're alone. You're not alone. There's other people doing these things. There's other people going through the same hardships as you, but there's also people experiencing the same beautiful, amazing things that you're experiencing on your farm. So keep pushing forward, keep thinking outside the box, and just keep enjoying doing what you're doing. Find the love for farming.
Thank you. That is awesome, and I appreciate you being on here. But guess what? I know you got to get out to the orchards, so we're
It's
going to
time.
let you go for now. But thanks, Andrew, for sharing and encouraging others. And it's really neat to see what you've learned and what you're going to continue to learn every year.
I appreciate it, Monty. You've been a huge help for me over the years. You always challenge my thought process, and I look forward to having many more conversations with you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Our conversation today showed how focusing on soil health can transform more than just farming practices. It can reshape the entire agricultural system. By embracing resilience, reducing reliance on chemicals, and working with nature, Andrew highlighted what's possible when we prioritize the soil beneath our feet. And if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing to create these resilient systems, check out our website at asn.farm. And there you can click on links to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.